developments here just in the last few minutes in the case of the possible Long Island serial killer. Investigators say minutes ago that they appear to be dealing with more than one killer. And they add that the area where several remains have been found appears to have been used as a dumping ground for bodies for several years. Investigators say one killer went to great lengths to hide the identity of one of the victims. She was dismembered and her body parts were dumped in two separate locations. The killer also tried to scratch off her tattoo. And coming up next hour, I'll be speaking with the former New York State detective Steve Kardian about what he makes of some new details that have just eked out in the last couple of minutes. We'll be talking to him next hour. Don't miss that. Also, some new information here, actually a lot of new information this hour in the search for a possible serial killer. It appears investigators are dealing with more than one killer in the discovery of at least 9 sets of human remains on Long Island. And they say the area appears to be a long-time dumping ground for bodies. Steve Kardian is a former New York State police detective. Steve, good to have you on here. You know, I was listening to the press conference and taking notes before I had to run up here to the studio, and the Suffolk County District Attorney cautioned today, look, this is not an investigation. This investigation is not an episode of CSI. It's going to take a long time to solve the case. And it sounds like it got quite a bit more complicated because it sounds like there's more than one killer and more than one modus operandi.
Well, they were looking from the beginning of this investigation that the possibility existed that there was more than one killer. So, yes, now it does complicate it. The good thing is that they are locating these bodies. The FBI is going to be doing some very sophisticated aerial photographing to try and identify other bodies. And they right now have 125 federal, state, and local police officers working on this case. So it's going to take a long time to solve this, but it's en route.
It's very different, though, especially from those 4 female victims who were found back in December. And then the DA described today these 2 females who were found today, or I shouldn't even say females. They were actually just their heads and their hands were found today. This is separate from finding the other pieces of their bodies some years ago. Also interesting, the killer tried to remove one of the women's tattoos, I guess, to hide her identity. So Steve, what do you glean from that information?
Well, this is a very smart individual that we're dealing with here. By the dismembering, by the attempting to remove the tattoo, the young woman you're speaking of, Jessica Taylor, was killed back in 2003, and she was subsequently identified through her tattoo through authorities in Washington, and that led to her being identified. So we have a man that is trying to cover up every possibility that could tie him back to this specific crime, including the mutilation of their bodies and using prepaid cell phones and making phone calls from a very, very crowded area.
So help me understand, if this killer tries to remove a tattoo and he's also removing a head and placing a head, I don't know how far from Manaville, Gilgo Beach is, maybe you know the lay of the land better, going to great lengths, as you say, intelligent, so that they don't find him because they don't want this woman to be identifiable. Is that correct?
Yes. He is going and taking every measure to ensure that he cannot be linked specifically to any of these crimes.
The DA... No, go ahead.
This area that the bodies are being found, I mean, if you could pick a more perfect dumping spot, I'm very familiar with this area. I've been down that road. There's no reason for any person to drive or at the very least jog in that area. So it's a very secluded area, a good spot for disclosure, for concealing a body or anything.
That's exactly what the New York DA said. It appears the area has become a popular dumping ground for bodies. Is it just a great dumping ground because they assume they can't be found? I mean, do you? And this is speculating, but would they be linked, or is it just coincidence?
It appears now that they're looking at this case as more than one killer. That could be 2, that could be 3. It could be that it's a good popular dumping grounds. This area, if you're familiar with it, it's highly densely wooded, very difficult to manage your way through. Law enforcement's having a very difficult time searching that area, and it would be an ideal place because there would be no reason for anyone to be in that specific area.
And so quickly, though, in terms of more of a profile for the serial killer, that then furthers what had been guessed before, that this individual is highly intelligent.
Law enforcement, the profile that they've created for him is that he's highly intelligent, he's organized, he likely lives a very normal life outside of this. He is a sadistic individual. He likely tortures these poor women before he disposes of them. We're dealing with a really, really intelligent, very deranged individual.
I have no words. Steve Kardian, thank you so much for hopping on. New details, even more coming out in this story. Thank you.